Good morning. This is Monique Offrey reporting live from Calgary, Alberta, where later today I will be interviewing Mihaela Slabe, a junior practitioner who completed their supervision 2 years ago. Mihaela will meet with us live in studio to discuss her counseling experience as a supervisee. Check in later. Ciao.
Welcome to Counseling News TV, where we bring you the latest and greatest in counseling theory and therapy. I'm Ray Johnson, your host today. I'm an RN, a Master's of Leadership, counseling therapist, and child and youth care counselor licensed with ACTA and a CCPA professional member. I have 35 years of practice experience in various counseling settings, including hospital, community counseling, both individual and group therapy, mediation, and mental health nursing. I've been a supervisor of mental health nurses, clinical social workers, and psychologists for more than 10 years in various settings. I hold an egalitarian worldview applied in an Adlerian theoretical framework. My supervisory training encompasses both clinical supervision for nurses and clinical supervision for therapists. In today's program, we have a panel of experts who will explain the evolution of supervision in psychotherapy, its clinical modalities and methods, E-Supervision by myself, and a special interview about the supervisee's experience. Thank you for joining us, and let's go over to you, Cottrell.
My name is Cottrell Ellis, and I currently work as a correctional counselor within the prison, providing mental health services to inmates. Prior to that, I was a counseling psychologist within a clinical setting, working with various mental health disorders, such as psychosis, depression, personality disorders, and prior to that, I was a probation officer. I am currently registered with the CCPA and CPAM of this region. I've had 4 years experience, and I've recently grounded myself in the humanistic approach, providing clients or inmates with meaning and purpose throughout their journey within a prison setting. I've been trained with Yorkville University in providing supervision practices to master's level students, and also working within the community providing supervision to students or personals who are looking for a supervisor. And I am looking forward to sharing this information with you guys. Good day, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Cottrell Ellis, reporting live with Counseling News TV from the Caribbean. And today, my segment will be looking on evolution. Not the evolution of biology, where they study cells, DNA, the brain. Not the evolution of anthropology, where they look at the origins of cultures, societies. But we are looking at the evolution of supervision in today's news report. And so I want to start off by just stating that supervision has been ongoing way before I was born, maybe before some of you were born. And it started off in the 19th century, early 20th century, where it was just primarily in the medical field. And little was given to emotional support and skill building, and more administrative focus. A lot of emphasis was on administrative component. So a lot of it was just more oversight and accountability rather than skill building and emotional support. And they also was characterized by informal guidance. However, there's a key component here, is that since then, reflective practice has been ongoing. And we continue to see a lot of reflective practice in our work today, especially in the doctoral program, and we did a course on reflective practice and reflexive practice. And so that has been going on since the 19th, early 20th century until now. Now we go down to look at the establishment of structure, which started to turn within the mid 20th century, looking at the 1970s. And important to note, around this time period was when the humanistic framework became popular. So the emergence of models within the 1970s and 1980s began to take form. And similarly with the humanistic framework, supervision begin to catch wind, it began to blow up, and it also went into educational focus. Now, this educational focus shifted from primarily counseling or therapy-like supervision toward more fostering personal growth and development. And now, even through our courses, now we can see how this professional development, skill development is occurring. We can see it happening. We can see some of the skills that we're learning are all encompasses this structural growth, this establishment of structure, and the emergence of models. And this also takes me back to a video that I was even watching, and the lady Marianne Polster was looking at the evolution of supervision, and her focus was on her supervisees. And she brought a supervisee from the crowd onto stage and conducted a mock session with her on stage. And one of the things that stood out to me before she began her demonstration was her focus on her supervisor. And she said that she focuses on her supervisees and what they are learning. And then she's curious about what possible things they have not tried that they might like to explore, and they can support that kind of exploration. And the process in supervision is then to encourage them, to show them how to support, how to suggest some kind of improvisation, something they might not have tried before, and in some fashion see to that they get a sense of what's new, move a little beyond the customary therapeutic boundaries that they have set for themselves or that they assume were in place when they began to practice. And that resonates with me deeply, guys. And that resonates deeply on Counseling News TV for me. And that just highlights that supervision is dynamic. It's multidimensional. It's not static. It's not rigid. And there are times when we have to improvise. And that's how it has evolved through time. It's moved from this rigid, accountable oversight practice to more focusing on a wide range of things. There's more models. So it has evolved significantly to our benefits in our approach to how we go about conducting supervision and how we as supervisees encounter supervision and our supervisors. And now, with present times, the late 20th century, it continued to evolve into standards and accredited focus with the introduction of the accredited system, so licensure and certain requirements in order to practice supervision. And this is imperative because we would not want someone who is not qualified or untrained to conduct supervision, because then what growth would happen? And it also incorporated evidence-based practice. So as we know, similarly to how we have to maintain our CEUs for our licensures, we also have to engage in certain trainings and best practice guidelines and adhere to our licensure guideline in order to maintain our stature as supervisees or supervisors and practice within these guidelines and these frameworks. And they offer a lot of workshops, professional development in this context. Now, as we continue to look at this evolution and the transition over the years, we look at some core functions of modern supervision. So, for example, they have a formative approach, which supports the continuous learning, professional growth, and skill enhancement, as we continue to see all around us. The restorative promote counselor well-being, resilience, prevention, and burnout. So if we look back at when we just started and spoke about how within the 19th century there was less concern about well-being and emotional support and skill building, and now we see how it evolved to skill building and emotional support, and also upholding ethical, professional, and legal standards to help us maintain and ensure that we don't cross any unnecessary boundaries, or we or our supervisors or whoever is conducting supervision are not liable to any form of malpractice. And now we continue to see how this has evolved. We continue to see how this has evolved to creating safe space for supervisees. We see how supervisors are approaching things from a parallel process and understanding that parallel process with clients, independent on how supervision might go, and how that can evolve and shape clients to also carry out what's carried into supervision from their clients' to the supervisor or from the supervisor to the clients. That transcendence, that countertransference is all mixed up there, and it just shows how it's evolved so significantly, especially in cases with non-disclosure versus self-disclosure. That evolution of how supervision has turned and shaped in such a way that's more dimensional, and we have to be constantly aware of these form of things, whether we are a supervisor or going into the supervisory field. We can look at the contemporary directions and the models. Now, we know one of the biggest models so far in supervision is the developmental approaches. This recognizes that supervision needs evolve as practitioners progress through different stages of professional maturity. Now, we have loads of theoretical frameworks, and I just spoke about developmental models. Just looks at the different stages of development from novice right up until that professional expertise component years. No matter how seasonal you are, supervision is always needed. Supervision is always there, because as therapists, as long as we're on our therapeutic journey, we continue to grow. We have that orientation focus model, looking at that humanistic existential factor. As I said earlier, it evolved around the same time. Supervision was forming and evolving even further, focusing on authenticity, empathy, and meaning making in supervision. Other models such as CBT, psychodynamic models, are also incorporated in this evolution component of supervision. I also like the integrative aspect that it notified, blending multiple theories to fit the supervisor's needs and context. And so we also go over in that technological era where supervision is no longer just one-on-one via text messages, via virtual connection, phone calls. Supervision is multidimensional. It's not just one-on-one anymore. It has evolved, shifted to the technological era. And we see a lot of emphasis on this technological component since COVID. And it continues to grow as now we can connect to supervisors anywhere. Supervisors can connect to supervisees anywhere around the world, showing their various traits of modalities, methods, and helping their supervisees to manage their clients. And we see how this continue to evolve. And as I said earlier, so far the modalities, the model have all evolved in such a way for supervision. And you know what else evolved, folks? The relationship between supervisees and supervisors. We've seen such an emphasis on this right now to establish such a strong relationship, which is imperative to that development, to that evolution of that therapeutic journey with your supervisor relationship. And we see how it can be very impactful, and it's very important to establish this relationship from the outset, from the start of it, and continue to grow and continue to develop. Similar to the evolution of supervision, the relationship evolves over time. The supervisor is in control and can dictate how it evolves, whether it's beneficial, whether it's helping the client, or whether it evolves to the point that it falls off at some point. Evolution in supervision happens, continue to happen, and we will continue to evolve as therapists through supervision.
Thank you, Cottrell, for that wonderful overview of the history of clinical supervision in psychotherapy. Now over to you, Fawn. Fawn is a registered social worker with over 10 years of experience in the field. She currently owns a private counseling practice where she works with individuals and couples, specializing in trauma, addictions, and relationship concerns. She also works full-time in a family health team in rural Ontario. In her practice, she often draws on evidence-based approaches such as EMDR and the Gottman method. She brings a humanistic, strength-based orientation to her work, focusing on empowering clients through self-determination and respect for their values. She will be speaking to us expertly about modalities and methods of supervision. Over to you, Fawn.
And welcome to those who are joining us today. I'm Fawn McInnes, live from my beautiful backyard. Today, I am bringing you a special report on a topic at the very heart of professional growth in counseling: clinical supervision. Why does supervision matter so much? Because it's more than oversight, it's mentorship, reflection, growth, and yes, sometimes even healing. Over the next 15 minutes, We'll break down the modalities and methods of supervision, consider how power dynamics and parallel processes unfold, and end with a special feature on the wounded healer. So let's get started. The 7 modalities of supervision each bring distinct strengths and unique challenges. Individual and dyadic supervision is the classic one-on-one model, fostering deep trust but sometimes limiting perspective. Triadic supervision involves 2 supervisees and 1 supervisor, encourages vicarious learning, though it can introduce subtle competition or comparison. Group supervision benefits from multiple perspectives and collaborative problem solving, but quieter voices may struggle to be heard. Team supervision, often based on live observation and immediate feedback, is highly dynamic, yet complex to manage. Peer supervision allows colleagues to learn together as equals, offering empowerment, though it tends to be less structured and may lack accountability. Supervision of supervision ensures that even supervisors receive guidance, supporting professional growth and maintaining quality. Finally, cross-disciplinary supervision expands perspectives from integrating input from other professions, though it requires careful attention to ethics and scope of practice boundaries. So think about it. When you've been in supervision, which modality felt most comfortable? Which pushed you out of your comfort zone? Now, let's head over to the methods desk. If modalities are the format, methods are the tools that bring supervision to life. Supervision methods vary widely, offering different ways to support growth and reflection. Self-report relies on supervisees describing their own experiences, which can be insightful, though sometimes overly polished. Case conceptualization and consultation allow for deep dives into client stories, fostering collaboration and understanding and planning next steps. Live observation offers real-time watching and instant feedback, which is especially useful in urgent situations, but can feel intimidating for supervisees. Interpersonal process recall uses recordings to revisit sessions, encouraging reflection on the supervisee's inner experience, almost like pressing rewind to see the work from a new angle. Modeling and demonstration provide supervisors the chance to show skills in action, offering powerful real-time learning. Co-therapy involves working alongside one another with clients, creating an immersive and supportive experience. Written approaches such as journals, reflections, or logs may be slower, but promote deep insight and self-awareness. Finally, expressive and arts-based methods bring creativity into supervision through art, music, or drama, opening up new ways for growth and understanding. Here's a reflective question for you. Which of these methods has brought you the deepest insight into your own growth as a clinician? So, how do modalities and methods fit together? The answer lies in being intentional. Supervisors must consider, when choosing approaches in supervision, 3 key considerations guide the process. Theoretical orientation plays an essential role, as methods need to align with the frameworks and perspectives that shape both the supervisor and the supervisee. Equally important are the developmental needs of the supervisee, since the approaches should be tailored to their stage of professional growth, whether they are just beginning their journey or refining advanced skills. Finally, ethical standards must always be upheld, ensuring that client confidentiality is protected while maintaining the highest level of professional responsibility. But perhaps the most overlooked piece of supervision process is the is the self of the supervisor. While models, methods, and ethics provide structure, it's the supervisor's own awareness that often drives the quality of the relationship. Self-awareness acts as the hidden engine of supervision, reminding us that supervisors are not neutral observers, but active participants who bring their own histories, values, and vulnerabilities into the process. When supervisors intentionally pause to reflect on their biases, values, and blind spots, they demonstrate humility and authenticity, modeling for supervisees the courage it takes to engage in honest self-reflection. This openness creates a safe and trusting atmosphere where supervisees feel encouraged to examine their own assumptions and growth areas. Engaging in practices such as self-supervision, metacognition, and metacompetence helps supervisors remain flexible and responsive, adjusting their approach to the unique needs of each supervisee. In this way, supervision becomes not just a technical exchange of knowledge and skills, but a deeply human process, one that fosters resilience, empathy, and authenticity on both sides of the relationship. Ultimately, the self of the supervisor transforms supervision from a task into a relational journey of mutual learning and professional growth. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you stopped to notice how your own worldview was shaping the way you supervised or were supervised? And now, something else that should be considered. In the world of counseling, we often hear about the wounded healer. Rooted in Jung's writings and the Greek myth of Chiron, the wounded healer represents the truth that many counselors are drawn to the field because of their own wounds. In supervision, this matters. Why? Because our personal histories, unresolved pain, or even current struggles can surface in subtle ways. Sometimes it shows up in parallel process, where the dynamics in supervision mirror those in therapy. Sometimes it influences non-disclosure, when supervisees fear judgment if they admit mistakes. But when the wounded healer is acknowledged with care, it becomes a strength. It deepens empathy, builds authentic connection, and fosters resilience. Supervision, then, isn't just about competencies and skills. It's also about making space for humanity, vulnerability, and healing. So, what's the takeaway tonight? Clinical supervision is far more than a checklist of competencies or a requirement to accrue hours. It's a living, transformative relationship. It's where theory meets practice, where reflection meets action, and where growth is not just encouraged, but cultivated. By thoughtfully combining the right supervisor modality with the right method, grounding every conversation in ethical practice, and courageously embracing the role of self, including the wounds and vulnerabilities we carry, supervision evolves into a powerful catalyst for professional and personal development. And here's your closing reflection. Consider how your own experiences and wounds, when recognized and held with compassion, can shape the way you show up in supervision. How might they influence the questions you ask, the empathy you extend, or the guidance you offer? Whether you are the supervisee seeking growth or the supervisor guiding another. Recognizing these patterns does not weaken our professionalism, it enriches it, creating a space where authenticity and insight meet. That's our report on understanding clinical supervision, modalities, and methods. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, in supervision, just like the news, context is everything. I'm Fawn McInnes, and thank you for tuning in, and may your reflective practice continue to illuminate both your journey and those you support. Now back to you, Raymond.
I'm reporting live from Northern Alberta about the increased use of text technology for virtual counseling and how clinical supervision of this counseling format is evolving to ensure it remains effective and responsive to clinicians' needs, best practices, and ethical standards. With the advent of digital technologies, communication methodologies, especially among youth, have evolved into primarily social media and text communications. You have all seen these young people on their phones. Young adults and youth have abandoned the telephone call and prefer text messaging. Goodbye, party line. Text offers anonymity and confidentiality in their often public lives. It also offers portability for youth to attend their counseling sessions with them, thereby eliminating location and time barriers. Kids can now take counseling on the road, in the classroom, on lunch break, or on the mountain. So counselors have to adapt. So they adapt to this new mode of therapy by becoming fully immersed in the conversation, focusing on hearing and seeing the conversation rather than the text itself, much like a good book. Since the text is the counseling, the text is a complete content and experience of this session. However, with no visual cues, the counselor imparts several adaptations into the texting sessions. These adaptations are called skills in text-based communication, or sitcoms. They include emojis, smiley faces, sad faces, exclamation faces, crying faces, and all the other emojis you've seen and not seen. Word spacing and pacing to slow things down is a technique by putting big spaces between words to basically pace the client into a slower and lower emotional state. There's also emotional bracketing, bracket, sigh, end bracket, that indicates emotions, and any emotion can be there, or nonverbal cues such as looking down, looking up, jumping for joy. All those can be emotionally bracketed to give a fuller context in place of the visual cues. E-Supervision, the new U to supervisory model for digital therapy. Clinical supervisors as well have to adapt. Digital supervision is responsible for ensuring that the supervisee demonstrates strategies that are ethically developed, mentally sound, and culturally appropriate for technology-assisted therapy. Is this possible, you might ask? And the answer is yes. Chen et al. In 2020 asserts that no significant difference was observed by students receiving online versus in-person supervision. Furthermore, they assert that there was no difference noted in measurable counseling skills achieved by digital means. So how does the clinical supervisor effectively supervise text-based counseling therapy? First, of course, is client and counselor consent. Informed consent is the foundation of all therapeutic practices, including that of clinical supervision. And now, once consent's obtained, the fun begins. There's two main types of digital therapy. One is synchronous, which can be texting or video chats or voice chats, and asynchronous, which is primarily the text-based model. With synchronous counseling models, the e-supervisor is part of a group chat that they can see live what the chats are and what the feedback is from the client's questions to the therapist's answers. And they can also give feedback directly within the chat or through a side chat to the supervisee to provide guidance and assistance during the therapy session. Furthermore, there's opportunity to evaluate the entirety of the chat session with the therapist, since there's a complete record of everything said. This provides opportunities for evaluation, for improvements, missed opportunities, or threats to therapeutic development. This feedback is invaluable to the supervisee and ultimately to the client. Many times, an asynchronous model is used. This provides more opportunity for evaluating client questions and answers prior to the therapist responding. Asynchronous is the client sends a text with a question or a comment or an answer, and then sometime later, a few minutes or an hour or a day, the therapist replies in whatever time agreement has been made. This allows for much more dialogue and thought about how sessions are evolving and how to guide to the best outcome. It provides opportunities to consult with the supervisor or vice versa with the supervisee to provide feedback that can be now applied to the next response or next question. The supervisor, for their process of supervision, can use tools for E-Supervision, including the COCE rating scale. These are the Cyber Counseling Objective Structured Clinical Examination. It's an 18-point based rating scale that assessed from the actual counseling transcript. This tool can also be used as self-evaluation, observation, for quality improvement, and professional growth. There are some complexities with digital therapy, and some of these are legal complexities. When a client lives in a different jurisdiction than the therapist providing the counseling services, and/or the supervisor is in a different jurisdiction, whose laws, regulatory standards, and ethical standards apply to that situation? It is essential to check with one's regulatory body, as well as any associations, for guidance regarding multi-jurisdictional therapy practices to ensure the highest of standards are kept. The CCPA recommends seeking legal advice to ensure one's liability insurance covers digital services offered outside one's current jurisdiction. It is a good idea to ensure one's consent form or statement identifies jurisdictional limitation. This provides clarity as to what particular ethics and standards of practice will be applied within the current session. The last area for both the supervisor and supervisee to be aware of is ethical considerations of intersectionality, which include assumed values, biases, worldview, client expectations, etc. The clinical supervisor has a duty to ensure that they are adequately supervising and guiding their supervisees within a culturally competent framework. So there you have it, E-Supervision of digital therapy. Something for you to know and to grow. Thank you. Turning it over back to you. Now for our last specialist of the day, we have Monique, who is a registered social worker since 2003 with a Master of Social Work from Dalhousie University, where she also taught in the facility and health professions from 2007 to 2013. She is former CEO of Family SOS, Discovery House, Caria, and You Think. In the last 3 years of her career, she has returned to her roots in counseling. She's excited to share that she has recently launched Uplift Next Level Counseling. She also taught a social work supervision course in a Master of Social Work program, and so she's excited to bring her expertise to the supervisee experience through an interview with a supervisee today. Over to you, Monique.
Hello and welcome to this segment of Counseling Now TV. Live in studio, we have Mihaela Slabe. Mihaela is a recent graduate of a counseling program, having graduated about 2 years ago. And I'm Monique Offrey, your news anchor. We're here to talk to Mihaela about her experience as a supervisee in counseling experience. This is a hot topic in our day, and we're very happy to have Mihaela here in studio. Mihaela, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent, excellent. So you were a counseling student about 2 years ago from an accredited program in Canada, and now you're in the workforce. Congratulations, you got through it.
I did.
Good. Okay, so here today we thought we might talk about what the experience was like for you as a supervisee in counseling. Okay, let's start with maybe just a basic question. Prior to starting your supervision, did you have some ideas as to what the experience might be like for you?
Somewhat. I had done counseling from a personal experience prior to that and came into it with influenced by a lot of those experiences, I think. So
okay. Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you have just shared? You came to counseling from some personal experiences. Mm-hmm. Are you referring to personal counseling?
Yeah. I had done counseling gone to counseling myself, and that was kind of the extent of what my counseling practice had been, except for what counseling we had done in our classes up until that point, that kind of thing. So.
Okay, very interesting. So if I have it right, your counseling training was very much informed from your lived experience,
yes,
having gone to therapy yourself and
yes,
having therapy
and what
counseling.
We had a couple of classes in which we went over how we should approach counseling and stuff, but I really feel like it was influenced by my own personal experiences a little bit more.
Okay, so really relying on, this is what counseling was like for me, this is the kind of therapist I think I want to be. But what about the formal training? Can we go back a little bit on what your formal counseling training looked like?
Yeah, well, it was one class. I had one class on formal counseling training, and it was, I was a distance learner, so it was all online when I was doing this course, and it was a lot of talking to our peers and practicing with them virtually and stuff. So
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to ask you more questions about your theoretical orientation and what types of counseling models that you felt you might apply or adopt in your practice. But before we go there, I want to check on an assumption I think I'm making. When you entered into your counseling supervision relationship at your practicum place, were you expecting your supervisor to teach you counseling?
A little bit. I was kind of going into it thinking that I would get a little bit more structure. I don't think I had a great understanding of even what counseling was specifically, only because since then I've learned a lot about how better to approach counseling rather than going into it with advice giving or anything like that. So I kind of thought that I would have more of a recipe that I'd be given that I could follow, or a template that I could follow in the meeting kind of thing.
In supervision meetings?
Sorry, in counseling sessions.
Okay, while you were practicing counseling. Wow, that's really fascinating to me. So with that said, you entered into this initial practice as a practicum student. So we for all intents and purposes, call you the supervisee, and you had a supervisor. And you were hoping, or your expectations were, if I understand you correctly, that your supervisor would assist you in building up some counseling competencies, maybe by having a recipe card or having some sort of structured way of beginning some implementation of counseling.
Yes.
Okay. And in your mind, what were you thinking your supervisor might be able to do for you other than to have the ability to sort of support you in those initial counseling sessions, overseeing counseling or having a counseling recipe card per se? In your mind, maybe just share with the audience what your discipline background is.
Yeah, I have my Master's of Social Work, which is where I was doing the counseling practicum. It's in international and community development, so it's not specifically clinical social work, but we decided to include a counseling element into my practicum when we were doing it, because I wanted to gain more skills in that department.
Okay.
And then before that, I have an undergraduate degree in fine arts that I was thinking of
Okay.
bringing into and potentially doing art therapy at some point.
So this is a unique experience in that the counseling training is not something that you necessarily felt super confident in terms of having the skills in your toolkit to bring to a practice. So you were considering the practicum as a place where you might be learning some of these strategies and techniques. Okay. And coming from a social work background, would you say that you had a theoretical orientation that you applied to your social work practice?
Oh yeah, like for my social work practice, I really draw a lot from critical social work theory, and all the things that kind of fall under that umbrella.
Right.
I think. Yeah, so especially like from a counseling perspective, I was drawn more towards things like narrative therapy, because I know that kind of allows the client to tell their own story, rework their own story, and that like really interested me, because I also believe in the power of storytelling.
Right.
Stuff. So I was drawn to those aspects, and I know that my supervisor also drew from some of those things as well.
Excellent. Okay, very interesting. So you felt that you had a connection to your supervisor by way of theoretical orientation? Yeah, that's great. Not everybody has that. So then, did you at some point, either before doing your practicum or during your practicum, notice that your theoretical orientation from your social work training would make its way into your counseling practice?
I think it did. Like, I do really think that the practicum helped like bridge the gap between theory and practice a little bit, but it also blurred the lines a little bit too. Like, I was expecting it to be more like easier to apply the theory, but it's more like nuanced in a lot of ways and stuff, and you have to draw from multiple theories that fit the client in counseling, so you can't just only use one theory.
Okay.
In my opinion.
In your opinion? Yeah, interesting. Some of us might call that an integrative approach.
Yes.
Some practitioners do draw from just one, and others draw from multiple. And there's no right or wrong way to go about that. But interesting that you would point that out, because perhaps that would be the role of a supervisor, to help you understand the connection between theory and practice. Excellent. Can we go back a little bit to your relationship with your supervisor? In counseling supervision, there are some pretty specific guidelines for supervisors to be able to implement together with their supervisee that speak to ethics and standards and so on. Did your supervisor share any of that with you in this experience? Did you have a sense of any obligations that your supervisor might have in supporting you in your practicum?
Yeah, that was like one of the core components that I wanted to learn in counseling as well. So we regularly talked about ethics, and especially how they applied to the institution that we were like doing the practicum at.
Okay. And in your recollection, did you ever have a sense that the supervisor-supervisee relationship might mirror the relationship that is similar to a counselor and their client?
Yeah, I did get that sense.
You did get that. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think because in a lot of ways you're also like counseling, or the supervisor is counseling the supervisee in like how best to approach it without telling them how to do it, but letting them find their own way to do it, kind of thing.
Very impressive, Mihaela. I want to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. This is something that is talked about in our milieu from time to time. When you were getting started, was a sense of feeling inadequate in your practice something that was present for you? Did you ever sit and wonder, do I really have what it takes, or maybe I don't belong here? In other words, something we might call imposter syndrome.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I've always had imposter syndrome with like everything, so it didn't feel like out of place in the situation, but I think it also didn't help that I wasn't specifically in like a clinical social work program, and that we had only taken one course in it before doing a counseling.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's a bit of self-disclosure, which is brave to do, and I appreciate that you were able to share that. Is self-disclosure something that is important to you?
I do feel like it's important. I know that you should use it sparingly in counseling, but I feel like it can be appropriate to help bridge build that client rapport and show them that you're human.
And to build trust.
Yeah.
Sometimes we also talk about building therapeutic alliance and using self-disclosure to help bridge that relationship. Are you of the view, or have you ever had the experience of having your supervisor self-disclose things about their experience in counseling?
Do you mean to the client while I was watching, or like
no, to you and your experience as a supervisee? So, for example, a supervisor who might share with you in your supervision meetings how they have felt growing in their practice, or what it felt like for them as a learner, or struggles that they might have in counseling.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate that, because it's nice to know that like imposter syndrome isn't like something solely, like it's something that lots of practitioners feel and stuff too.
Right.
Yeah.
It can be validating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and perhaps allows for one to feel less alone in their experience and in their growth. Okay, very interesting. Okay, well, the hour is drawing to a close, but I would really love to ask you one final question. If you had a magic wand and were to redo your supervisee experience, what would be the one thing that you feel could really change to enhance the experience that you had? What is that? What is it that you might wish that you could have done differently, or have offered to you that could have enhanced your experience?
Honestly, like since doing my practicum, I have taken the counseling certification level 1 through Dalhousie, and that like helped so much with like understanding counseling a little bit more, like prepping for it in my mind. So I kind of wish I had done that course before going into my practicum, so that I could have a better understanding, like feel a little bit more confident in approaching it.
I really appreciate what you've just shared, and lifelong learning is one of the tenets that we value in our codes of ethics and in our standards of practice. So, wonderful example. You exemplify the importance of lifelong learning and how we're all a part of that. All of us are part of that. But I can certainly appreciate your magic wand response, that a little bit more preparation, a little bit more training might have helped you prior to coming into the supervisee relationship or role. Well, that calls us to the end of our session. Back to you.
Welcome to my live panel, and we are having a discussion at the end of our session here today, just to ask some questions of each other in our areas of expertise. Thank you, Fawn, for joining us, Monique and Cottrell, and I'm Ray Johnson, the host today. So the first one I would like to start off with is asking Monique a question. So Monique, I'd like you to share with us, what was your experience in supervising Mihaela? What was that?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ray. And thanks for inviting me to the panel. It's just such an honor to be here with these panelists who are so well versed in clinical supervision. So this is very exciting. Well, just to go back to my experience supervising Mihaela, I'd like the audience to know that it was actually me who was Mihaela's supervisor a couple of years ago, and having her in studio to ask her about her experience was a very unique experience. It felt quite authentic. Her answers, although they weren't scripted or asked of her before, I was hearing for the first time. And as I reflect on the experience of having supervised her 2 years ago, her answers were consistent with how I felt the experience had gone as her supervisor. So, for example, in the interview, Mihaela was asked about theoretical orientation and whether she felt that her supervisor had gone over theoretical orientation with her during the supervision relationship. And I believe Mihaela answered yes. Interestingly, I believe that Mihaela's experience as a supervisee was successful in large part because we held the same theoretical orientations. Both Mihaela and I come from a feminist orientation and apply quite humanistic therapeutic interventions in our practice. And having that relationship allowed for some disclosures, felt security, as Gutman reports in their study of 2020, the importance of some level of disclosure in order to bring some balance to the relationship. And the perception of felt security and also relational humility, as Shepard and colleagues discuss in their 2016 research. So all in all, I would say that it was really lovely to have Mihaela on our series and to be able to ask her pointedly how they felt about their experience as a supervisee. So I want to thank you for asking me that question. And I think it fits really well with a question I would really like to ask Fawn. And so if I may, I'd like to ask Fawn the next question. And that is, Fawn, could you speak a little bit about the concepts of self and the wounded healer as influencers of the supervision? I'd love to hear from you on that, Fawn.
Okay, hi everyone, and thank you, Monique, for that great question. So, both the self of the supervisor and the idea of the wounded healer play powerful roles in shaping the supervision process. So, the self of the supervisor highlights the importance of self-awareness, reminding supervisors that they bring their own values, histories, and blind spots into the relationship. So, by engaging in reflective practices such as self-supervision and metacognition, supervisors model openness and authenticity, which actually helps create a safe and trusting atmospheres for supervisees. Similarly, the wounded healer acknowledges that many counselors enter the profession with personal wounds or live struggles that may surface during supervision, sometimes through parallel processes or non-disclosure. So when addressed with care, these experiences can deepen empathy, strengthen connection, and foster resilience, transforming supervision from a technical task into a relational and healing for both supervisor and supervisee. So,
Mhm.
uh,
Yes, thank
what?
you so much.
Yes. So, I'm gonna ask Ray now, um, if I can. Ray, how do you feel that the phases of counseling compare with live versus text-based sessions, and what implications does this have on clinical supervision?
Well, thank you, Fawn, for that question. Yeah, for sure. There's been identified five distinct phases. We have the rapport building, the problem identification, the problem exploration, the problem solving, and wrap up phases in counseling sessions. In a study by Fu et al. In 2024, they analyzed transcripts from just under 3,000 text-based counseling sessions in Hong Kong on a platform called Open Up, primarily targeted at youth. But in this thing, they found what was happening in those sessions, and they took a look and they found that in the first two stages, the uh, rapport building and problem identification, keeping those short and concise seemed to have a higher satisfaction and outcome rating for the clients accessing the service. the clients really preferred more time being spent in the latter two stages, the problem exploration and problem solving portion. They really wanted to explore it and then have real pragmatic outcomes. Like, what can we do? They're very pragmatic in what they desired for an outcome. And so this has implications for the clinical supervisor in that when we are supervising text-based therapy sessions, we can assist our supervisee to really form that therapeutic alliance quickly, build rapport quickly, and really streamline the process for identifying what is the core problem with the client, and then start working on exploring it, spend digging deep in the exploration phase, and then being really pragmatic to create goals that are smart goals, really smart, being specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time oriented. And this is what the outcome what these clients want in the text-based sessions. So that's how we would adapt it and supervise it. And the phases are very similar, but how we spend time in those phases is fairly specific to the text-based therapy session. Thank you, Fawn, for that question. It was really fun looking into that stuff. So then I would like to ask Cottrell a question. And how has supervision helped you to evolve as a supervisee?
Thanks, Ray, for asking the questions. Everyone can hear me fine. Everyone can hear me fine, right? Yeah, thanks, Ray, for asking that question. That's a really interesting question, because supervision has helped me to evolve in various ways, and I like to think of it in like 4 ways. So for me, one of the first ways is definitely in professional skill building. So building my interaction with clients, building rapport with clients, building and helping me to grow in an orientation sense. I know Shepard speaks about micro-counseling skills in the text, and it looks at your various therapeutic skills. So, you're questioning how you build rapport with clients, how you manage to navigate therapeutic settings, navigate therapeutic relationships. And that comes under the developmental competency skills, which, as I said in my news report, that also is an evolution component in terms of evolving, how therapists evolve through various stages developmentally. And so supervision has definitely helped me to evolve in that area. Supervision has helped me to evolve as a supervisee through developing my values as a professional. Right? So looking at what do I value as a therapist, what do I value as a supervisee, and how do I want to bring that within my sessions, and also use that to show clients of how they can build their values, how they can set core foundations for themselves as well. And it gives me the confidence to perform and follow, the ethical guidelines that has been set out for me, and also set that out for my clients. So, third component of how supervision helped me to evolve as a supervisee is even when it comes to conducting my interventions. Coming from a humanistic framework stance, just providing clients with that unconditional regard, providing them with that empathy, looking at purpose, meanings, holding that holistic intervention component and moving forward with clients in that aspect, and just helping them to be more centered, and helping me as a supervisee to be more centered, helping me to be more grounded, helping me to be more realistic with myself, and also question a lot. Question why, right? Question why, question what's the purpose of this intervention? What's the meaning behind it? So it really helps me to stay grounded with that component. And lastly, how has supervision helped me to evolve as a supervisee? Well, to be honest, it also helped me to evolve as a supervisee and in my personal life as well, because some of the things that are practiced as a supervisee, I also try to apply to myself in my personal life, and wonder how can I guess be a better person in my life, but also be a better person professionally, because sometimes our personal life and the professional life intersects. And so it's important for us to evolve in, all these areas, and it's important for me to evolve in each of that area as well too. So I can be a better therapist and also be a better person to family and friends out there too as well.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your expertise and joining me for this discussion on the supervisor-supervisee relationships. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
And we're off.
Dun, dun, dun.